Okay, question here about the nature of man. My question is regarding the days of creation. I've been reading a book that was recommended by former CBC pastor John Buchema when he was teaching through Genesis. The book is titled In the Beginning We Misunderstood and is authored by another former CBC pastor, Johnny Miller, and John Sodden. The authors explain how their interpretation of the creation days, which is more figurative than literal, can be understood based on the original language and the historical context in which Moses was writing. With all due respect, why should the doctrinal statement allow for other biblical interpretations of the days of creation? So, very important question. I love science and I love the Bible. So, anytime we get science and the Bible coming together, my ears perk up. I mean, this is like a subject that I am passionate about. And a very important one too. What about origin? What does the Bible say about this, and how does that relate to the science that we are engaging with in the world in which we live? We know more today about all of these things, way more than we did 100 years ago. So, and the discoveries continue. So, very important question. The first thing to say, let's address the doctrinal statement itself and remind ourselves of the purpose of it. The doctrinal statement is the teaching position of Cypress Bible Church. And so we would expect perhaps that other people who could sign the statement of faith, which is required to become a member, they could sign that no problem. Doesn't have any reference to this. Um, but the doctrinal statement is the teaching position of Cypress Bible Church. And so, what the level of specificity of the doctrinal statement is designed so that we can teach through books of the Bible and not have confusion. So, imagine, for example, if we had one pastor who is teaching through Genesis with a literal interpretation of the 7 days, young Earth, all that, and another person said, no, 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 I think I'm going to teach right alongside you. I'm going to teach a different view. It'd be horribly confusing. So it's designed to say this is the teaching position of the church. Now, let me explain why we landed on this position. It's more to do than just rocks. It's not just about fossils and rocks and these kinds of things, and as if we care a whole bunch about the age of rocks. It's not it at all. There's something theological at stake. Here's the question: the Bible's claim is that death came through the world through sin. Now, if you take an old Earth, if you say the Earth is millions and millions of years old, and all these strata layer represent millions of years in which creatures lived and died, um, that statement alone, is contrary to what the scriptures teach, that death came into the world through sin. Um, but even more difficult than that is the question of, were Adam and Eve real people? Think about that. Were Adam and Eve real human beings? The first human beings, not the end of a long string uh, of evolutionary processes, even guided by God through the Holy Spirit. Theistic evolution. We're not saying it was unguided chance. We say, okay, we look at the fossil record, and we're going to say that was God through His providential hand or His superintending hand, guiding the process of creation through millions of years. If that's what you're going to say, then the question is, where does Adam and Eve fit in there? Was Adam and Eve a real human being that entered into the world? How did that process work? You see, it's very, very difficult because by the time we get to the New Testament, I mean, in Romans chapter 5, just listen to this. Therefore, just as sin came into the world through one man, and death through sin, and so death spread to all men because all sinned. For sin indeed was in the world before the law was given, but sin is not counted where there is no law. Yet death reigned from Adam to Moses, even over those whose sinning was not like the transgression of Adam, who was a type of the one who was to come. So, all the argument of Romans 5 about how Christ came as the second Adam to undo the curse of the first Adam, all of that presupposes a literal Adam who literally fell in a literal garden, and it was through that fall and disobedience that sin entered into the world. The entire storyline of the Bible, honestly, hinges on this, whether or not this was a true event or not. And so the real thing that is at stake is God's um, claim that when Jesus sent his son into the world to die, he's coming to undo the curse of sin that was literally introduced by the man Adam and woman Adam and Eve. Now, if let me just make this additional point. If you feel like, man, I would love to believe that, but I just feel like the weight of scientific evidence is so strong in regards to the theory of evolution, these millions of years, that I'm having trouble with that. Listen, there are lots of great resources out there. 2 years ago, I floated down the Grand Canyon with a group um, of PhDs. Honestly, there was 40 people in the group, and I was the only person in the group who didn't have a PhD. And the purpose of the trip was to show, from a young Earth perspective, all the evidence that um, that is available to those who are willing to kind of just bend an ear and listen. And so I've got tons of resources I can point you to if you want to just grab me sometime in the foyer or just look up online. I mean, lots of places you can look this up. I would encourage you spend some time. The evidence is there, and take a second look.